Now, gives me an extreme amount of pleasure and privilege to bring up three of the people responsible for the incredible film you have just seen. Composer Carl Zittrer, star John Saxon, and director Bob Clark. Well, I know that there are lots of unanswered questions that a lot of you have, some of which I'm pretty sure Bob won't answer, but I know that there's plenty of others that he will. So,
I'll answer any question. I may lie.
Okay. This gentleman here.
Yes.
Who are Billy and Agnes?
Who are Billy? They're my cousins, and they financed. I have a whole story, sub-story about Billy and Agnes. They are brother and sister, I'll tell you that much. In my story, they are, Billy has abused his younger sister. There's a history, spoken and unspoken. The unspoken part of it is perhaps Billy killed his parents, perhaps he sealed Agnes up for years. There is a remake being done with a very wonderful team of a young writer-director team, and they're going to go further with the question of Billy and Agnes and Peter. We obviously are pulling a puzzler at the end. Could it have been Peter? There are two reasons why it probably couldn't, especially the ending is clearly it couldn't be because he's still alive. The other one that I think I wasn't quite deft enough is when Peter comes downstairs after the one obscene phone call. He might have had time to do all those things up there, though I doubt it. I wished I had Peter come down to Olivia on the phone with John Saxon a little quicker, so you would have said, gee, I don't see how it could have been Peter. But there are other reasons, if you want to think about them, why it really couldn't have been Peter. He didn't fit the some of the criteria that were needed.
Could you talk about Reginald Morris, your cinematographer, and the relationship you had working on the preparation for this? Okay.
This was my first film with Reg, a great cinematographer, the brother of, what's his name, Dan? Oswald Wright was his brother, great English, Oswald Wright. Reggie Morris, Oswald Morris. Reggie was a great technician. We spent elaborate time. We had, I think, nine or 10 weeks to shoot the movie, even though we only had $400,000. Here, because of the difficulty of getting a 30-year-old print, but we spent elaborate time talking about it and planning and thinking this over. And it's not an easy movie in terms of it's light and dark and it's still, but it was very, very well planned and thought, and we took the time to shoot it, so it worked.
I've read, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've read over the years that you apparently a few years after this were planning a semi-sequel set around Halloween, or that some kind of a follow-up set around Halloween. I don't know if that's true, and if it is true, what your plans were for that at all?
Well, it's part of the story's pot roll. I'll tell it very quickly. I did a movie 4 years later. I started a movie with John Carpenter, set in the Tennessee mountains with retarded people, and John was a great fan of Black Christmas. That's why he got Warner Bros. To hire me to do this movie. And he said, are you going to do a sequel to Black Christmas? And I said, no, I don't intend to do any more. Your film is my last horror film. I'm not in the business to be a horror filmmaker. It's just a good way to start a career. I'm not ashamed. I'm quite proud of him. And John said, well, if you did do it, what would it be? And I said, well, I would have it that the killer was caught. It's later that year, the next fall, and he has escaped. And he's going back to the sorority house, and I'm going to call it Halloween. So, but let me say this: John Carpenter wrote a screenplay, directed a movie, cast it, did the music, edited, did all of that. And in fact, the movie was brought to him by the company with the title already on. So, I think John, he loved the movie, and I believe he was influenced some by it. But he did not copy my movie, and Halloween is entirely John Carpenter's, and it's one of the greats of its kind.
The sound of the phone calls, was that just your voices, or was there something special?
It's quite a story. There were three of us. I was one of them. Nick Mancuso young actor who's had quite a career since. That was the beginning of his career, and a young lady whose name I can't remember. And we spent a great deal of time on those voices. We really did. Marty was telling me that Nick, you guys were telling me that Nick said I had him standing on his head to try to create a different sound. So we worked elaborately. We spent probably 2.5, 3 weeks doing those phone calls. And the story elements in it are very important, what he's saying. Nothing contradicts the state of mind that we might pursue in the end of it. But yeah, they're untreated. They're no mechanical, slight reverb and that kind of thing. But they're just our voices. We didn't fake anything with them. And I was curious to see that I thought, first time he spoke, Nick sounded like Keir Delay, and it shocked me. I went, oh, wait a minute.
I read the script. I liked it very, very much. But then was told, it was offered to me, I think, and I accepted. And then I was told that someone called and apologized and said that they had made a mistake. That some other portion of the production had already hired another actor. So I was very disappointed. But a few days later, I got a telephone call and said, from I think my agents, I think it was, could I get on a plane to go to Toronto late in the afternoon, the same day? Apparently the other actor decided not to do the part. And so I took the plane up to Toronto, and the first scene I did, I think about right at the moment I got into the literally was it
time to get makeup.
Yeah, I got makeup, and we worked on that scene in the park where I was with the megaphone until, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning.
The story is actually a little more flattering to John. I had wanted John in the first place. When I first called his agents, there was a conflict. He couldn't do it. So who I did hire was, most of you probably won't remember, a great actor named Edmund O'Brien. Yeah, some of you do. He was a great fellow. And I was quite pleased. It was a good choice if I couldn't have John. And Edmund came up to Toronto, and I had the worst day of my life. Edmund was in the first stages, not the first stages, near advanced stages of Alzheimer's. And I spent an hour, more than an hour, about 2 hours in John's room at the hotel while talking to him, because the managers called me to say that there may be a problem, better be careful. And I waited an hour while this man put his coat on. It took him an hour. He could talk well. It was tragic. My heart was broken. He told me how he got on the plane. His 9-year-old son said, "Dad, now you're working. It's all going to be okay." Oh, my God. And we were going out to do this scene to John. That was early in the film. And I couldn't send Edmund. I thought I would take a chance because he was coherent. He wasn't, but we'd have blanks. But I realized I couldn't send him in that weather. So we made an emergency call, and sure enough, John's other thing had fallen through, and he was able to come and rescue us, and we took Edmund to the plane, and he never worked again. I think he did one other small part with somebody, but that was a tragic, deep story. Oh. So that's the real story.
It's amplified.
Yeah, you were the first one.
How did you come up with some of the sounds that we have in this?
Some of the sounds, okay. Some of the sounds were, this was in the day, as everybody here will know, before samplers, before synthesizers. So much of these sounds came from a piano that I destroyed. I scraped it with combs and brushes and forks and recorded it as many ways as I could think of, reversed it, put it through reverb, sent it to a recording studio, had other things done to it. That any of it survived all that mangling is really quite surprising. But they were mostly concrete sounds that you find anywhere, and then we manipulated them. And much of it was voices, sometimes from the same woman whose name I can't remember either, that helped us with the phone calls. Vocals sung into the piano to excite the strings of the piano, recorded backwards. I mean, anything you can think of we did to the sound. I'm glad it worked for you. I was never sure at the time.
Well, did you also choose which recordings of the carols would be used? Because all of the traditional Christmas carols that are in this still have a really kind of creepy, eerie tone to them that's
Well,
really effective.
Well, in fact, we made those, as my recollection serves me well enough. I think we recorded those Christmas carols. Now, those children that you see outside were not the vocalists, but I think every Christmas carol that you hear in the movie, we recorded specifically for the purposes.
Except the first one,
No, the first one, that's quite correct.
Yeah, I have another question for John Saxon. I'm just curious, it's a dark movie, but what was it like to do all of the comedic scenes within that?
There was no difficulty in doing them. Working with Bob on the film was, in my part of the thing, very collaborative. It was rather easy. Bob merely and very clearly had in mind what he wanted to do in every shot, and he explained it very simply to me, and I found I caught on very, very quickly, and I think I understood what was happening, what to do, and I think we had a very good working relationship. Yeah.
Yep. That's John is a really fine actor. I do come with all my ideas to begin with, but when you've got great actors, you have to be open to their ideas. You have to let them flow, and a surprising amount more than John probably remembers came spontaneously. He has little moments like coming down the stairs when they talk about Barbara. She's upstairs asleep, and he added, we'll leave her, we'll let her sleep. And that gets a nice laugh from the audience because we've seen her fellatio act. How many here know what the word fellatio means, by the way? Oh, okay, almost everybody.
What is it?
We had a dispute about the pronunciation.
Oh, I don't, what, fellatio or fellatio?
No,
it is?
Fellatio, I said.
Oh, right, yeah, it is fellatio. It is oral sex, for those of you that didn't know.
Either way, how long was the actress wrapped in plastic for?
Oh, well, let's see. She probably about 60 seconds a shot. She was very good. She did not ever a flicker or a movement from Lynn. She did a remarkable job. It was the limit of her. I don't think there are any takes on her for more than a minute. Maybe some of the pullbacks, but by the time we got back, she was able then to breathe a little bit.
John, this is obviously not the only horror film, successful horror film that you've done. I was just wondering, because you've done a number of genre films, different genres. Do you have a particular favorite type of genre to act in?
The drama, plain simple drama. At this stage, I really would like something, sort of mature and emotional. I've done an action film, I've done a karate film, I've done some other, horror films, Nightmare on Elm Street. The first of which I thought was really interesting, but progressively I think they use it as a vehicle for special effects, and it began to lose more and more, in my estimation, of a real meaning of whatever dreams are about, and the meaning of them, and so on. Special? No, I mean, I think what I said at the beginning is what I'd like a really, I feel like a different person from when I started my career, and looking for a role that would be, I don't know, serious.
The other question was actually about the phone calls, which are so intricate and disturbing and evocative. I'm just curious, was it written out that detail in the script, or was it more improvised afterwards?
It's not written out in that much detail. We created as we went. It is in the script. The nature of it is there.
How involved was Roy Moore with the film once you were shooting?
I had him pummeled every morning before we started shooting, but I let him on set. No, Roy was involved. He was there. No, I don't think he was. No, I don't think. He was working on another project. That's right. I virtually never have writers on the set because I think it's just difficult. And I write myself, and some films I do a great deal of work on. Death Dream, Alan Ormsby's script, I contributed almost nothing. Murder by Decree, maybe the original idea of Murder by Decree was my concept, but John Hopkins wrote a great script. I may have contributed 10%. This one I did, Roy and I worked together. I contributed a great deal to this one, but some I contribute a lot, some I don't, and some I've written myself, Porky's and Christmas Story with Gene Shepherd, of course. It was his work. Yeah, When a Stranger Called really did literally rip the idea off. It was rather direct. I was so surprised. I didn't see it, but when I heard that famous line, "The killer's in the house, the calls are coming from the house," is quoted from it as well. It's always nice to know you've been inventive. What I really tried to invent in this movie more than anything else, you know how college and high school students had been. It was beach blanket bikini until virtually to this film. A few films of intelligence had been done before that. Help me out, guys. What was the one example I used?
Well, you had A Separate Piece, maybe. You had
Rebel
Summer
Without
of
a Cause.
42.
Right, even earlier than that, though, some of the
Rebel Without a Cause.
Rebel Without a Cause, you had young people, but they were literary young people. And I think in this movie I tried to create real college students, and I'm really kind of amazed at how they hold up here. They're pretty much today. They aren't that much, the vulgarity has something to do with it, but their attitude, their coolness. So I wanted these people to be as real as possible. No college, high school, rah-rah, beach blanket bikini, and I'm quite pleased with. Yes?
What were some of your influences for Black Christmas? What films influenced you?
It sounds arrogant to say, but I actually had none that I know of. Clearly, I was not a huge movie buff. I came out of the legitimate theater. I liked films, but I was just a guy that liked films. I wasn't a student. I remember one film, and I cannot remember who the star was. It was a pretty good lady star. If I remembered her, we'd all remember the film a little. It wasn't a famous film, which had a little bit of this camera work, but only used it for a few minutes at one point. Up until then, I hadn't seen that. I know people had used it. I'm not the first one to use subjective camera, but to make it a whole character. It could have been. That's not the one, though. It's like a two-word title. But that sense of, again, as I say, I wanted the camera to involve the audience and be a subjective camera as well as when it's the point of view of the killer.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you selected the key location, the sorority house?
We searched a long time for that sorority house. I had my people out. I'd selected one in northern Toronto. I wasn't happy with it. I finally decided I'm going to take a walk around. I walked around Rosedale and the environs, and that was private property, so I actually walked onto that property and got the back, because you can only see the back of the house from the road quite a ways away, and I knew immediately, God, this is it. It was like born. Everything about it, the way the stairs led down to the hallway and the hallway into the living room, so I could do all that as one tie-in, and then the actual attic thing, it was there leading down to the telephone. So it was a great find. I lucked out and found it, because for 5 or 6 weeks I couldn't. Next. Yes, sir.
Who played Peter's piano audition when it was such a big day?
Okay,
This guy right here.
Here's how we did that. For Peter, or Keir Delay, well, we had music for this already. You know, it had to be, the order was make it something very strange. I think we did that part rather well.
Yeah.
But Keir Delay played the piano. He listened to what we were playing, and he sat and played it. You see his shoulders and his body movements, and then for close-ups, I did it. I put on Keir Delay's wristwatch and sport coat, and was shot by Burt Dunk, and then it was all cut together, and that's how it happened.
If you listen carefully while Olivia's asleep, you hear someone say, "Shall we check the rest of the house in the attic?" And you hear him say, "No, don't touch a thing to the state." And we're accurate, we're right on the money. A state forensic crew would come, not a small town college. They would not touch that location. That's why they weren't stupid that they didn't go up and find them. They were not going to do that, and it's not good police work until the forensic team got there. So we're perfectly justified to have him up there, and he's pretty bright because he probably knows that too. So I just felt the same way you do. That image is so grim. I wanted to make that the last thing we see. We hear him. We know he's there. So so let's have 2 more questions, and we'll get out of here. Anybody? Good. Okay, well, folks, I appreciated this turnout. You guys were terrific. I know it's a lot of
Once again, a thunderous applause for Carl Zittrer, John Saxon. There are writers and directors in this audience. I know who you are. Give this man the dramatic part he deserves. And Mr. Bob Clark.